we'll do that. All right. So,
Sure.
all right, everyone. Welcome back to the Manny Bernabe Show. We are live with a very special guest, Charlotte Fuller, who is going to be talking today about selling digital transformation. We are live. The benefit of that is that you get to ask your questions and you get to participate in the conversation. So I definitely encourage you to do that in the chat. The downside is that sometimes we have some technical difficulties, as we've had earlier today. But hey, net, I think it's fun to get the interaction. So with that, Charlotte, welcome to the show. And if you wouldn't mind briefly saying hi to everybody and introducing yourself.
Yeah, sure, of course. Hi, Manny, again. So my name's I'm by trade a digital transformation consultant. So that means I predominantly work with industrial type companies, so manufacturing companies, engineering companies, and a lot more now in the renewable energy space around finding and driving use cases for digital transformation across the organization, and doing so in a way that really looks to define and add value and really realize that return on investment. I'm also the founder of the Digital Transformation Sales School. So this is an online program that basically teaches other people to do what I do. So there we are. That's me.
Awesome. Charlotte, thanks for coming on the show. I think, I left the kickstart our conversation with thinking about why digital transformation even needs selling at all. I think, my younger self, I was a little bit more naive. I thought digital transformation was just about technology and project management. Now I'm a little bit wiser. I know better. I know that if you're an innovation manager within a large organization, yes, you need to be familiar with the technology and the change management, but also you need to think about how you're going to be persuading your executives to give you budget. You need to think about how you're going to be selling these projects to the business unit managers that have to take away time from hitting their quarterly metrics to give you resources and information to get your digital transformation project up and running. You have to convince the frontline operators and employees to give you some time and their attention, and that your digital transformation isn't just some sort of science project that the company's going to forget about in 2 months. So I feel like now I'm much more appreciative of selling digital transformation. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why digital transformation even needs selling at all?
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting, actually. You touched on something even as you were speaking there, Manny. I think you mentioned if you're an innovation manager or someone in a similar position in an organization, selling your vision, right? Well, that's the sort of point. It has to be everyone's vision, first of all. So we need to kind of change that way of thinking. I think going back to why we need to sell digital transformation, I think we need to think about, why do we need to do digital transformation in the first place? And always taking it a step back from what we're doing and thinking about things a little bit more strategically, and saying, okay, well, what are really the needs of this organization, and thinking about it from that perspective, from very much a high level perspective in terms of, well, where does this organization want to go in the future and what are their corporate goals? As an innovation manager, what we need to be doing is tying everything we do back to that. Okay. So that's the first thing that's really important. So if we are wanting, say we were trying to do something from an innovation perspective from our own agenda, firstly, as you mentioned, we need to be getting buy-in from stakeholders from the top, depending on where you sit in the organization. So you really do need to be selling the benefits of tied to what do they want, right? And we'll potentially dive into this a little bit more, but always putting ourselves in the situation of whoever it is that we are trying to convince. Okay, so firstly, why do we want to do digital transformation from a top-down perspective? We need to be aware of that from an organizational perspective. But then also as well, I think often as people who are very familiar with different technologies, we think, of course, it's obvious that you would want to drive digital transformation and become more digital in an organization. But we have to be thinking about how other people think. So we've already mentioned from a top-down perspective, we need to be tying it to corporate goals, but from more of a bottom-up perspective, when we're looking at different people in the organization, technology has lots of different meanings to lots of different people. And it can be a very scary concept. And even if, we get the bit right where we are selling the vision for digital transformation up in an organization, it won't be successful unless the people who are actually doing the work in the bottom really are bought into the solution as well. So if you don't get both parts right, you will end up trying to do digital transformation to people, and you just won't get very far. You'll get a lot of it'll be very uncomfortable, first of all, trying to get anything through, but also you'll get, a lot of pushback, a lot of failed attempts at technology deployment in the organization.
Those are great points. Charlotte, you talked about having a shared vision. Do you have any
Yeah.
techniques or methods in terms of getting at that shared vision? Because I know that can be very hard, because sometimes it's one innovation leader that has sort of this idea of where they want to go and they just want to drive change throughout the organization. Sometimes it's an executive that has a vision and wants to drive change. But I think, yeah, you're right. The best implementation starts with a vision that everybody can relate to and feels empowered and energized by. How do you think about getting at that shared vision?
Yeah. So the way that we usually go around or about doing that is by bringing in different stakeholders at different levels of the organization into workshops and co-creating a vision together. What that will allow you to do is get a shared understanding of what the main problems are across the organization that you're trying to solve with technology. So not just what you think should be done, but what actually needs to be done,
Right.
both from a leadership perspective and on the ground, to make sure, firstly, you're still going to be solving the right problems with the vision that you have. But then also, creating, like I said, that buy-in from different levels of the organization and co-creating that vision. What you can then do is use these workshops to create sort of very like significant use cases that are going to drive tangible value in the organization because you've already checked with the right people. But then also you've got then a bunch of digital ambassadors potentially that are already bought in and talking about your solution in their different areas, which is super important.
I really like that. I think you're right. The best projects that I've had are when at the very beginning I have buy-in from managers and front level employees, where they're
Mhm.
backing me on my project, where they're saying like, yeah, we have to do this with Manny and company because it's gonna make my life easier. And Manny's taking the time to understand my problems, and he has showed me how this new technology is gonna
Mhm.
help us and help me do my job a little bit better. And when I
Yeah.
have those folks standing behind me, and asking for budget and asking for a project, it just makes a world of difference. And I guess to your point, it starts with making sure that you're involving those folks early and getting them involved in a workshop type of fashion. Now, do you when you're is there any particular way you go about these workshops? Because I think that can be somewhat difficult when you have different levels of folks within the organization
Mhm.
and getting everybody in the same room. Is there like a secret sauce that you can share with us in terms of making sure you have a great workshop for these folks?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different things. I always use firstly design thinking methods to like run the workshops effectively, right? So it's just like fun, right?
Right.
The first thing you have to do is like make these things like interesting for people to get involved in, right? The first thing, as soon as you mention workshop, like in an organization, you'll get, oh God, like I'm gonna have to take time out of my day, like I've got stuff going on, like people don't want to be part of it, right? So
Right.
realize that like you've got to make these things like actually engaging for people first of all, before you do anything else. Then once you've got people actually in a room or on an online environment, whatever, both work very well. you need to be thinking about, like you said, the different types of stakeholders that you have, and making sure that you are giving everyone the chance to bring their ideas forward. So, for example, what often happens, especially it depends on obviously the sort of culture in the organization, but if you've got strong leadership figures, for example, people might not always want to speak up about what is actually happening in the organization, what the problems are. And so, how you manage that is well, there's a few different ways, but the way I like to manage that is to just make sure, for example, that I am asking leadership to feedback last. So getting all ideas of all the different people and then sort of then having leadership come forward with their views, for example. Those are a couple of things that I tend to think about. We can go into any specific methods.
No, I think that's a great tip. I feel like the craft of a workshop is a very underappreciated skill. Like it's something that I've invested a lot in the last 2 years as I've started my own consulting business. Because you're right, when people hear workshop, it's like, oh, not this again. And but they're absolutely critical if you want a high impact, fast, collaborative way to get information from different pools of the organization in an efficient way. The workshop is a way to do it. Now there is I think there is a fun way to do it, to your point, that's engaging and that's interactive, and even if it's remote based, we've done that in Miro, and there's the technology part, but then also how you structure things, the questions, the exercises, how you rank things, how you ask people to stay silent and write things down and put them on the board. Try to minimize the effect that leadership has sometimes in squashing some of the thoughts from the frontline folks. Like there is a lot of science and technique that goes into it, and when you have a great workshop experience, you feel it, and when you have a subpar workshop experience, you also kind of know that as well.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I think a couple of things is, from a methods perspective, from an actual, like, how do you structure the workshops effectively? That is there's a process behind it, isn't there, Manny? You have to really think, want to get out of those workshops and then take it back and really think about the activities that are going to get you there. But from an instructor perspective, I mean, it's almost performative in a way. You are driving, you're on stage for a period of time, and you're really like, driving all of the different people in the room to make sure that you really are getting everything that you need out of that workshop for the organization to make sure it's successful. And like you say, when done well, incredibly successful. When fallen flat, also the opposite, so you have to be careful with it.
Right. Charlotte, earlier you talked about selling a vision to executives versus selling a vision to frontline employees, people that are going to be carrying out. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. What have been some of the differences that you've seen in that approach? Do you have to put together two different types of decks, two different types of communication packages? How do you differentiate between those two types of positioning?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'll always do is say, go back to the wants and needs of the person that you are aiming to communicate with. So when I'm thinking about an executive presentation, I'm really thinking about, well, what do I want as an executive in this organization, right? What is it, where is this organization going, and what do I care about? What are the goals that I need to meet here? And this is definitely more around the financial benefits of technology transformation. What are the operational savings that I can make, efficiency savings? What are the revenue generation opportunities, and what is the return on investment? So from a leadership perspective, ROI is always going to be a huge driver of a conversation, as it should be, right? We never want to be doing technology for technology's sake. We want to be doing it because it is going to move us forward towards a common goal. From a sort of more of a bottom-up perspective, when we're talking to other people in the organization, what I really want to be thinking about is less around sort of necessarily the financial benefits of it. You might want to touch on it if people are interested, but really about like, how is life going to be different for you after this in a positive way? How will this make your world better? Firstly, you might want to be touching on the wider benefits to the organization, like how is this globally going to drive us forward as an organization, but then also on a personal perspective as well. On a day-to-day basis, your life will be better because of X, Y, and Z. You will spend, what do people really want, right? Well, they want to spend less time doing things they don't like doing. They
Right.
want to feel more confident generally. They want to feel happier. They want to not spend extra hours in the office and go home and spend time with their friends and family. Like, these are the sorts of things that we want to be selling to people. And so whenever I think about selling technology, I always think about doing it in the following way. Okay, what's the problem that someone is having currently? What is the solution that I am providing from a technology perspective? And how will life look after that solution, right? And that's the story that you need to be telling, okay? And that's what will really help shape change in someone's mind, and really kind of start to create that cultural change for you. In terms of how you actually kind of communicate that across the organization, I mean, it depends on what channels you have available, but certainly you want to be driving and talking about it all of the time, right? It's like almost you'll sound like a broken record, but for good reason, because we have to hear things as human beings so many times before they even sink in, right? So what we're thinking about doing when we're talking about digital transformation and cultural change towards digital transformation in an organization, because that's what digital innovators have, right? And successful digitally transformed companies, or companies that are well on the way to doing that, they have a culture of digital transformation. And all a culture is just a way of thinking. And it's thinking about sort of digital first. Now, so that goes to the point, well, how do you change someone's belief system and way of thinking? And a belief is simply just a thought that we've thought so many times that it becomes ingrained as a belief. So what we need to do then is drive new thoughts enough times that they then become beliefs in an organization, and that is a way of driving thought and culture change.
I really like those points. In particular, the point around selling to frontline employees and operators around the problem solution and how life is going to be better after you implement the solution. I think for a lot of technologists, the focus is too much on the solution. So let me just build something and get it out there for you, and
Yeah,
a lot less time on really understanding the problem, and a lot less time on painting the benefit that's going to come to the end user. And I've seen
yeah,
that lead me down to some problematic paths in the past. In particular for AI and machine learning, I'll tell you that's the case because as a data scientist, I come in and I say, "Oh, you must need like a deep learning neural net model to fix your problem, right? Let me get working on that. I'll come back to you in 6 months." And then you find out that really what they needed is they needed a process to be digitized or automated.
Mhm.
They didn't need like this fancy machine learning model. And then you find out that your tool isn't very effective because you didn't sell them on why they needed it or why it was going to benefit them, and so you've just lost 6 months of time and development. So I really like that. I think for all of us, we can focus on really understanding the problem and exploring that fully before we get into the solution building, and then also spend a lot of time on telling them why their life is going to be amazing after we've spent all this time on setting up that solution. Um, I also really like the point around talking about digital transformation all the time. I think you're right. As companies are making the shift from traditional non-digital to being digital, that is sort of that's a big identity shift. And
Mhm.
if you've gone through that, I'm sure you have, like, that's something you have to self-talk yourself through a lot and just continually
Yeah,
say, like, okay, now we're digital first, now we're digital first, and then try to point to instances of where that's happening in the organization to help reinforce that. So now we're digital first. Here's our plan. Here's this great use case that Charlotte and company have been working on. Here's a
yeah,
great example of how we were able to take this non-digital process. Now it's digital. Here are all the benefits, and here's the other things that we're going to be doing. And we're just going to keep doing this, folks, because that's what's going to be required for us to be successful and growing in this next sort of ecosystem of digital and data products.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right. I mean, really showing the success, doing digital transformation incrementally and then proving the success in the organization is just killer because it does a couple of things. One, it gets people thinking. It's like, oh, look at that, that's interesting. I wonder if there's opportunities in my area that I can bring forward for digital transformation. Like, that's pretty cool. um, so that's one side of things, but also, like, change should be incremental over time. We can only withstand so much. So doing both as an organization and also as people in an organization. So doing things steadily like that, in small bursts, driving success, showing success is really a great way to do it. And then also, I really appreciated what you said there about, not potentially also in your own experience of not communicating maybe the benefits of a solution in the past, or understanding problems. We've all done it, right? We've all jumped in and just thought about things from our perspective and been like, oh, crumbs, I should have, this was a mistake. And I think I see that time and time again, more so now that I'm hyper aware of it, is that, technology providers often focus heavily on features. What is the feature of this solution? Like, the thing that they often struggle with is meeting people where they are in the organization, in terms of where is the organization currently? Like you said, are they ready for certain things like machine learning? Like, have they got everything else, all of the other ducks that they need to be aligned first before they can even consider such a solution? And then also, from a sort of personal perspective as well, are you talking about, are you able to meet people where they are in terms of the language that you use, their understanding of technology? Are you having a normal conversation with someone, right? And what I mean by that is that very often when we go into organizations as technology providers or solution providers, we forget that people are normal human beings and just want to have a normal conversation about technology and understand the benefits of the solution. And we often use very sort of often unnecessary, complicated language to describe something that doesn't need to be discussed in such a way. And so what that does is drive a disconnect then between the technology provider and the business sort of leader on the other side, where you've got this sort of odd situation where neither really understands each other very well. And both are probably a bit too afraid to say that. And so the conversation just goes nowhere, and that's often a big problem.
100%. A great point. I'll reiterate that you want to focus on outcomes, not features, or you
Mhm.
want to focus on benefits, not features. I think for as technologists, it's very easy for us to come in with features, but you have to rearrange your pitch and say, here are the outcomes that you're going to get by using our technologies. That's a great point.
Definitely,
And
definitely.
I think you're right. The jargon is very
Mhm.
off-putting to a lot of users. And in
Yeah.
my space, that's clearly evident. I can come in and I can say, hey, I'm going to put together a random forest model that's going to give you some probability of an event happening within a 7-day period with this percent of confidence. Or I can say, hey, this tool is going to tell you when this is going to break down in the next 7 days. Are you interested in that?
Yeah.
That's like that's a much easier way to communicate what it is that you're doing to end user, and always take away the jargon and keep it simple. You're talking to another human being, and you got to keep it as simple as possible. Um, Charlotte, so we talked about innovation leaders and the need for them to sell change internally. We have some great tips there. I think the bottom line is that if you're an innovation leader, this just has to be on the top of your list. You have to think about how you're going to roll this out, how you're going to persuade companies, how you're going to sell to executives, how you're going to sell to frontline employees. I think there's another group that also can benefit from this framework, which is traditional technology providers. And I know you're doing a fair amount of work with those folks in helping them
Mhm.
think about how to make the shift from just technology resellers and sellers to folks that are consultative and strategic partners in selling digital transformation to the vendors. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's happening? What's the shift look like for these companies, and why it's so important?
Yeah, sure. So, generally when we talk about, selling digital transformation, certainly I think the conversation around technology is changing often. So where once upon a time it was very much IT driven, it is now driven by sort of leadership in the organization. So it's very much a business focused conversation more often. And so more kind of traditional technology providers, like as we've just discussed, need a little bit more support in having that conversation, and being able to support on a business level perspective, as opposed to just sort of between the sort of IT teams, for example. And so what needs to happen then is very often such companies have a great reputation in being a wonderful delivery partner, for example, but aren't often well known for being consultative, right? So now what is happening is that we need to be able to sort of train those types of conversations, be able to become more of that strategic partner that can really support organizations who have now shifted the conversation up to sort of a business C level, that want to kind of drive digital transformation very strategically in the organization.
Those are great points. I'm seeing some folks, some comments
Hmm.
here in the chat. I was overlooking them, but maybe we can talk about these before we continue
Yeah.
talking about that. But Philip here says, Charlotte, you mentioned doing digital transformation incrementally. What are some low hanging fruit options in manufacturing, common value drivers that typically bring value quickly in order to justify further investment in transformation?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I'm going to give you like an answer that you're not going to like, but I'm going to give it anyway because it's the one that I believe in. You know, I think the thing is you have to be. I don't like to be like, here's low hanging fruit generically. Like, have that conversation with the client and do those workshops and understand from their perspective what their low hanging fruit are. So, for example, in some of the workshop techniques that we use, we will identify low hanging fruit for clients specifically, because we otherwise we're opening up the conversation potentially from my perspective in the wrong way. I would be, it would, if I was having that conversation with someone on the business side, if I'm coming at them with low hanging fruit that I think are the low hanging fruit, it potentially won't hit the mark. The way that I would flip that conversation is to be like, okay, tell me what's going on for you right now, and like just sit and listen and have that conversation and have a cup of tea with them or whatever, and just sit and listen. And from that, you'll probably uncover what some of those easy wins might be.
Yeah, no, great point from Philip. Yeah, I think you want to show some wins early on to keep them motivated on the transformation
Yeah.
path, because it can be a while for them to get to that point, right? Um,
Yeah. And it is a good point, to just jump in there, like to make it clear, like after having these initial conversations with the client, Philippe, like what we do is I will have the initial conversation with the client. I'll be like, okay, tell me what's going on. I'll get them in a position where they are ready to have a sort of workshop with us around looking for digital transformation use cases. And the output of this workshop is that we work with the client to identify usually 4 or 5 use cases for technology in the organization for digital, whatever use cases for whatever it is. And I will help them rank them in terms of sort of difficulty and relative importance across the organization in a way that we identify what will drive the highest return on investment for them, but also what the low-hanging fruit are. What we then do is put those use cases in a roadmap and look at in what process are we going to basically develop those, implement them, and in which way will we drive the value quickly for them? Just to give a little bit more context on that.
Great. We've got a question here from Christian. There's a trade-off between getting your ducks in a row and showing value quickly. Any tips here?
It's I'm trying to think really. It's a good question. I mean, like, so if I think about the organization I'm working with at the moment, which is one of them, the biggest client I'm working with at the moment is a very large energy provider, renewable energy provider, and we're doing a couple of things. So I'm working in 2 parts with them. Firstly, with their internal innovation team, so the team that really drives digital transformation across the organization, relatively new team. And also, a little bit more on sort of the operations strategy side. So we're working with them in a couple of different ways. The first one is looking at their sort of operations and data strategy across their infrastructure and tools and technology. So that's the big kind of getting the ducks in a row side of things. But what we're doing at the same time is running a workshop like I just discussed, where we ran a series of those workshops with, this organization's huge, right? But we ran a series of these workshops across a few weeks in October, where we identified lots of different use cases for technology innovation. And we identified both, right? So firstly, we understood that there's loads of things that they wanted to do with technology, but first they had to drive the strategy. So to answer your question directly, if you can get yourself in a position where you are a provider or you are working with partners where together you could potentially go in and I don't know anything about your situation specifically. One partner, for example, if they're particularly good at, potentially like infrastructure strategy or data strategy, for example, could work on that side, or at the same time you're working on smaller use cases for technology. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a one and, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great tip. And keep the questions and comments coming. These are really good questions. Thank you, Philippe and Christian, for your questions. And if you have any insights or any thoughts you want to share too, if you have any tips in terms of how you're tackling this, feel free to drop it in the comment section.
Yeah, please.
As well. Charlotte, going back to traditional technology providers, what are they getting wrong about selling digital transformation? Where's like the biggest like misconception that you have to clear up as soon as you start working with them?
Yeah, I think we've spoken about quite a lot of it already. I think it's some of the how you're selling your solutions, like what you think people need versus what you think that they need is the biggest one. And also remembering that one of the big ones has just come to mind is cultivating stakeholder relationships. Is something that I see people struggle with time and time again. I think often when people are and we're wildly generalizing here, but or from more of a technical background, it's often not a skill that is is very well possessed. And so that's something that I see people struggle with a little bit, because we need to remember that everything that we do, regardless of whether it's involving technology or not, is always driven by people. The success of which will fall on people, and so I see all the time, technology providers pitching solutions to organizations, not really having the stakeholder relationships that they need in order to do that, first of all. But then secondly, if by some sort of slight miracle that they do manage to sell something in on that basis, they're not really then cultivating the relationships across the organization that they need to continue being a trusted provider in that organization. So thinking about themselves not just as a provider, but also as a coach, as a therapist at times for people in the organization, and really knowing that the strength of our success is built on those relationships.
Two gems, absolutely, Charlotte. Spot on. I'm wondering if you can talk about cultivating stakeholder relationship starting an engagement with a company. A, how do you know whether you've done that, and what's a test, a litmus test that you might have for a salesperson, and B, any techniques or methods that you would recommend a team implementing to get at that a rich stakeholder relationship.
Yeah. So to answer your first question, how do you know that you've done that? My clients come to me with questions. You know, they yeah, they come to me and they're like, what do you think? They'll ask your opinion. And I think that's how you know you've built a relationship on trust, is that someone will come to you and ask for your opinion before moving forward with something. And I think that's the big one. How do you create strong stakeholder relationships? Well, I just mentioned it briefly, it's trust, right? So everything that you do, I always think about it like this. A strong relationship is always built on a strong foundation of trust, right? So every interaction that you have with someone on a daily basis is either adding to a trust spot or taking it away, right? And at the start, there's nothing in it. And so your job as a provider, as a decent human being in this situation, is to keep adding to that pot all of the time, right? And the way that you continue to build those relationships is, well, how do you build a good relationship across any area of your life? You show that you are caring about the person, that you care about their needs more than yours. Okay, you understand them. So going back to the problem discovery side of things, what's important to them more than important to you. And then that you're reliable, that you show up and you do what you say that you're going to do, and that they can trust you. So every interaction that you have should be kind of based on those trust building principles, and that will definitely help you drive relationships.
Yes, is a good tip is building trust with these stakeholders. I find that the best way to do that, at least for me in my instance, is to try to add value to these folks outside of my narrow domain expertise. So of course, I can talk about AI, machine learning for say fleet operations, but I want to appreciate the full world of my innovation leader client, and I want to just be abreast of what's going on in their space and send them interesting articles, or be willing to field a call that they might, or a question that they might have around a competitor or a new function or a new product.
Mhm.
And I think you're right. If they're comfortable coming to you and just asking you for your advice, you're more in an advisory type of role.
Definitely.
And when it comes around to implementing the technology, you're going to be top of mind and saying, oh yeah, obviously we have to go with Manny and company on this particular deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, Manny. I love the points you made there about, like, even putting their best interest first, even if that means, sharing something from another provider, that might not be in your best interest, but might be in theirs. For example, like things like that, like you said, adding to the trust pot that might not be right now the best thing for you, but in the future it would be. Because like you said, they'll come back to you and they'll remember that.
Right, and then I think this other point too is really good around around cultivating relationships within the broader organization past that initial
Mhm.
engagement. Any techniques or tips around that in terms of how to do that?
Yeah, I just, have a chat with people, man. Like,
Right.
honestly, like, I mean, it depends. Like, now, a lot of the work that I do is remote, but, certainly before that, I'd always kind of walk around companies, like talk to people like while they're getting a coffee, understand what's happening, right, in the organization, and start conversations like that. Like just be curious more than anything. But then also I'm just trying to think, it's happened very, very easily in one of the, certainly one of the accounts that I'm in at the moment, where I just seem to be all over this organization in, in a really good way. And I'm just trying to think, like, how did that even happen, And I think while we were running different workshops, for example, I'll ask people about themselves. Like, tell me about you. Like, what's going on in your world? And once you start just being curious about people, like genuinely curious and caring about them, you start to find out what's going on in different areas of the organization.
Right.
And none of these other opportunities I actively went after. They came to me. They came to us because they were like, oh, yeah, I remember, talking, she was saying XYZ about this thing. Um, does that help? I sort of, it's like,
It's
that's how I do it. I talk to people.
it's so obvious, but it's also so hard to do. But it's
Yeah.
I almost thinking like people centered selling or something like that. It's this idea that hey, yeah, you're selling a technology, but really, you have to make sure you're focusing on people, different folks that you come into contact with when you're selling, when you're in that initial engagement. You show curiosity around their problems and what they're doing. You strike up conversations, you try to be helpful and useful where you can, and that'll just uncover new ways for you to work together and to be helpful to
Yeah.
that company. And I think it's one of those things that is, if you're tracking key metrics, like, number of coffees that you've had within a company with key folks, maybe it's not like a key metric that anybody's going to track, but that can potentially yield a tremendous amount of value over the long haul, not over
Yeah.
weeks or months, but over 6 months, a year.
Oh,
Those
yeah.
coffees, those engagements, those emails, follow-ups that you did, those questions, they're
Mhm.
they're going to come back to you many times over, as these budgets become available, and as these projects start getting traction.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's you've hit the nail on the head there, it will. And I think always just I never think about it in terms of this conversation is going to come back to me. I think that's a really like I know you didn't mean it that way at all, but like it's just not a way that I think. I think just like I said, lead with curiosity. Lead with like just what's going on for you, and like you said, it will come. Be a curious, be a good person, and that will come back to you.
That's great. And I'm such a quantitative person. I'm always thinking like, how would I track this? Like over like this past week, I had 2 coffees with
Yeah.
these people from other departments within this company. That's winning. So maybe offline you can tell me about like numbers that I can track, so I can keep myself under this, this data science mind. Um, so Charlotte, I know you have a big project rolling out, the digital transformation sales school.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What's the program about? Who is it for? Get us up to speed on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I initially built this. for me. So this was the training program that did not exist when I was going through corporate, and first of all, my leaders at the time would be, there was very much a view of everyone sells. And I'd be like, yeah, great. But like how though? Like that is the question. So firstly, it was built based on my own learnings of how to actually sell digital technology successfully in an organization from an advisory first perspective. What then happened was, I was successfully running digital transformation accounts in organizations, and technology providers that I was working with were like, well, will you work with us in terms of being a partner to support us in client engagements? But I mean, the problem is there's only one of me, right? So what then happened was that scaled into, well, can you help us train our employees to do what you do successfully? So all the things that we've been talking about, Manny, having those sales conversations, driving initiatives, helping organizations work out what those initiatives are, and then how you measure them and drive them through to success. And so this process, I've trained probably, I think, around coming up to sort of 200 people in this way, this methodology and process. And so we've thrown it all into a very comprehensive online program. It's got literally all of the templates that I use as a consultant. So you can pick it up, a recipe kit, and go and drive digital transformation engagements successfully. But it really is a pre-sales tool for digital transformation engagements. So how do you uncover problems? How do you help an organization create a set of viable use cases that they are bought into effectively? How do you run those workshops? How do you drive the technology initiatives in terms of like actual design and implementation? How do you do that effectively? What do the commercials look like around it? And how do you gain investment post initial engagement so that you're setting yourself up for long-term client account success? So it is a one-stop shop for everything digital transformation sales, basically. And I absolutely love it.
That's great. And this is a new program that you're rolling out. Is there an ideal role that would benefit from this? Yeah, is this like a pre-sales engineering manager, or is it a consultant within a technology provider, or is it a salesperson? What's the
Yeah.
role that would, or roles that would benefit from the program?
Yeah, it's generally more digital sort of, well, technology sales consultants, advisory consultants, or technical providers who have consultative teams type people or technology orientated people that want to be able to sell more digital transformation solutions, basically.
Gotcha. Awesome. Where can people find more? Do you have a website we can point them towards?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at charlottefuller.com. We are currently updating it this week, but you can also find more information about it by just getting in touch with me on LinkedIn. So Charlotte Fuller, digital strategist, and you can ping us a DM with Sales School, and we will give you all of the juicy information.
Awesome. Yes. Charlottefuller.com. I just got it on a ticker so people can go there to get updated on this program and other events that Charlotte has coming out. And also definitely follow her on LinkedIn or connect with her on LinkedIn. Charlotte, we're coming up on time. I guess my the maybe one question to kind of wrap up on is any advice you would get, like what's like the number one piece of advice you would give your younger self starting as a technology consultant, if you had to kind of go back and do that? What's kind of like been the biggest realization now that you're a professional and seasoned and you're helping other folks get to where you are?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. The first one is around as we keep discussing, is people. Like, just know that you're dealing with people, and find out what they want. Find out what they want and help them with it. That will help you drive anything. And then also, I think I would always touch on some of the confidence issues for my younger self. So I think, often, whoever we are, but often, as technologists, dealing with different organizations, particularly in if we are a service provider or a consultant, and we are dealing with lots of different types of people and types of environments, you don't have to know everything, and everyone feels uncomfortable
Right.
a lot of the time, and you can still do okay. Like, everyone feels the same way, and I think those are the sort of main things that I would tell myself.
Those are great points. You had an earlier phrase in their conversation, something to the effect of digital transformation to people. So like you don't want to do digital transformation to people. Maybe the way to phrase it is what you want to do is you want to do digital transformation for people. So not
And with them, yeah.
or with them. That's even better. Yeah, digital transformation with people, not digital transformation to people. So
Yeah,
maybe a little bit of a of a tagline for you. I really like
love
that.
it. New slogan.
That
Thanks.
That's great. Charlotte, thank you so much for coming on the show. I very much enjoyed learning about your program and what you're doing and the great tidbits around selling digital transformation. The replay will be up shortly on this, and definitely be sure to follow Charlotte on LinkedIn and connect with her on LinkedIn, and also head over to charlottefuller.com for more information. With that, thank you, Charlotte, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Manny. Absolutely loved it.